Okay, let's start with Maria Bamford. She's known as a talented stand-up comic. Her new show on Netflix is getting great reviews. And like her stand-up, the show mines her experience with mental illness for humor. She's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and talks openly about her experience being hospitalized. Randy, I'll start with you. What did you think about the way mental illness is portrayed on Lady Dynamite?
Well, I think it absolutely was played for laughs. And I thought there were times in the show where I was laughing along, but I got to be honest with you, I don't know what I was laughing at. I don't know if I should have been laughing in some ways. I mean, I think it's great, in a culture where maybe mental illness has had such a kind of emergence as an open topic. It's discussed often enough, I think, in rather kind of hushed and grave terms. And so, are we mature enough as a culture to now have a laugh at it as a way to kind of embrace and make this real? Absolutely. Does the show use it in interesting ways in terms of how it tells stories? Yeah, but there are some times, though, where some of the other characters are pretty nasty to Maria. And they kind of point specifically to her mental illness as the source of this nastiness. And it's kind of funny, wink, wink, we're in on the joke. But then I think, well, why am I laughing at this? Am I laughing at someone because she is clearly suffering from mental illness?
We'll play a clip from the show that I think describes what you're talking about a little bit later, and we'll get into that. Rachel, what do you think generally about how mental illness is portrayed on the show?
Well, I think it's interesting because often when you see mental illness treated, like when I think about a show like Homeland, which is, this dramatic, tense show, you're seeing it from the outside. You're not really getting into Carrie's brain. I think what Maria Bamford does with Lady Dynamite is actually it's through her perspective often. So, there are these weird things that happen where suddenly she's at a lunch with this kind of pushy agent and she turns into a sheep. Or she goes to her parents' house and suddenly she's a little girl. She breaks character a lot and the show, sort of breaks out of its imagined world. So Patton Oswalt plays a cop in the show, but then he'll break character and say, like, listen, Maria, you're going to do stand-up on this? That's crazy. That's a bad idea. So there's a lot of sort of understanding what it's like to have that sense of being disoriented, to feel like your grip on reality might not be the same as other people's. And so I think what she's trying to do in the show, and I think she's effective at it, is to have you have that sense of being somewhat disoriented, being somewhat out of step with the rest of the world, feeling a bit shaky in a way. And I think for me it works.
Let's play a scene here that describes what Randy was talking about, and let's get into this question of what exactly we're laughing at here. So there's a scene in the pilot where Maria's frenemy Susan comes over to return her dog Bert. She'd been looking after Bert while Maria was in the hospital.
Special delivery. When USDA choice pug. You're welcome, Maria, for taking such good care of him while you were in the loony bin. What's that, Bert? Oh, you want to stay with Mama Susan? Oh, that's not very nice, Bert. She's not a mental veg on rye.
Bert, I missed you so much.
Here you go.
So that, I think, speaks to what you're talking about, Randy. Emily, what did you think about that scene? I mean, we hear loony bin, we hear mental veg on rye. What are we laughing at in that scene?
Yeah, I think that we're laughing at what a terrible friend this person is, and that we've all felt let down by someone who, for whatever reason, is supposed to be close to us. In the show, that particular character, Susan, is a childhood friend, and Maria's parents seemingly kind of like Susan, maybe a bit more than Maria sometimes. And it's more like a sibling rivalry for people who don't have siblings, I think. Well, it's true she uses some unflattering language to talk about mental illness because the show is not even really about mental illness, it's about comedy. I feel like the fact that we get to see Maria like building her act later through these experiences means that she's taking it in a different direction and making something out of it.
But I think you're drawing too easy a distinction there between it's not about mental illness, it's about comedy. No, it's about making comedy out of mental illness, right? So if this was the parallel scene in Arrested Development, I would be laughing along when the Bluth family members are being nasty to each other in creative and terrible ways. Mm-hmm. But in this particular case, though, the fact that Maria Bamford, the actor, has herself been very public about her mental illness and finding ways to kind of, in some ways, I guess, own it and make it part of her comedy. I think this is where I really kind of struggled was, okay, if that's the case, then I get it. It's funny, but at the same time, I mean, mental veg on rye. It's creative, but it seems a little nasty to me.
But if you watch her face in the scene, what you see often in Maria Bamford's face is this fragility. And I think the thing that's quite interesting is I think that we've had a lot of female comedians who people like Amy Schumer or Mindy Kaling or Tina Fey who kind of push back, and they will sort of take on their haters, whether it's about their bodies or whatever it is. I think what's interesting about Maria Bamford is you see her fragility and vulnerability. And so when the friend is saying that stuff, you see the look on Maria's face. And I think you can, read into it what you will. But to me, what I felt was, here's somebody who actually can't go to many places for help. She's living with her parents. This friend needs to help her out. She's kind of got to put up with this cruelty in a way. And I think that those are the kinds of things that people do say. Right. I think it's sort of taken to the most extreme and the cruelest. But I think this is actually language that is still used about mental illness.
Maria Bamford was on Q about a year and a half ago talking to our friend Tom Power. And one of the things she said was that her mission is not only to make people laugh.
I would like to make it okay to ask for help in a major way, like in an embarrassing way, to go. I felt like, and this is my own experience, that going into a hospital where I could not hurt myself saved my life. Like I felt like, and it also took off the responsibility of all these people sort of having to watch me. But that was something I didn't want to do. I said, well, I'm going to kill myself, but I'm not insane.
Some powerful words there, contrasted with a show that has a very upbeat tone, remarkably upbeat tone, the show. I'll start with you, Rachel. What do you think comedy can do for the stigma around mental illness?
Well, one of the things I think is interesting is that I think that, with any kind of group of people who have been marginalized, there's kind of the way they get portrayed as often, as like noble or as suffering. And I think what Bamford is doing here is she's a person who has a mental illness, who is also a comedian, who's also, and so it's part of it. It's sort of like she continues to go on. So she also is making comedy. She's also dealing with, truculent, friends and co-stars. And so I think what it does is it kind of says this isn't this sort of tragic character suffering. And she's also struggling. So I think what it does is it's sort of giving a fuller view of what a life looks like when you have something as, her bipolar disorder is quite extreme. If it's, so I think this is what she has to live a life, and this is what this life looks like.
Yeah, one of the strengths of the show is that it's set up in 3 different timelines. So there's the present where Maria is trying to make a go of it in Hollywood again. And then there's the recent past where she's living in her hometown and her frenemy, as you so charitably called her, I would just say horrible person in her life, is advising her to do all these make all these bad decisions. And then there's right before that when she's having a manic episode brought on by big success of being in a commercial for a company called Checklist. I think that because it's actually the show is taking place in the present, which happens far after the treatment and after the arc of oh my gosh, this terrible thing happened and I had a manic breakdown. I think that it's really strong in being able to show us 3 different ways of viewing in one single life how this has played out. And it's not just about, oh, she's sad, so we're going to have the blue filter, which is a joke they actually do make. They have a blue filter on the most depressive scenes where she's in the institution. But that's where other kind of comedies would just stop. They would just stop by showing a person who's really sad. And that's the danger of drama when you're dealing with mental illness, is it just makes it very static and cheesy and hopeless. Whereas Maria Bamford, she goes on and has a life.
Final thoughts to you, Randy. You said you feel like we're ready for a show like this.
Yeah, and I think what both Emily and Rachel really have brought up is how well the show is made. In other words, it makes her struggles part of the kind of the breaking of the screen, let's say, and these kind of self-reflexive moments. And I think Tina Fey is the relevant parallel here, right? Tina Fey in 30 Rock, she's a bit of a loser who's succeeding at life, right? And we're kind of laughing along as she's succeeding. And I think the hope here is that Maria Bamford is sort of represented here as struggling, a bit of a loser in life who's succeeding along, and we'll see where that takes the show.